My name is Laura Mitchell, and if someone had told me that on my 50th birthday I would be standing in my bedroom watching my husband pack his suitcase to leave me, I would have laughed in their face, because I believed that no matter how much life changed, Paul, the man I had been with for over 2 decades, would always be by my side. But I was wrong, so terribly wrong. I don't know why you're making such a scene, Laura. You had to see this coming. Paul stood in the middle of our bedroom, his designer shirts neatly folded in the expensive suitcase I had bought him in Paris. I had thought that suitcase would accompany him on important business trips for our family. But no, it would accompany him into his new life, with Amanda, a 25-year-old woman. I've already filed the divorce papers. My lawyer will contact you about splitting the assets. Then again, there's really not much left to split. At first, I didn't understand. His words sounded distant, like static noise in the background. But then I looked at Paul, at the smug smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. And suddenly, I understood. He wasn't just leaving me. He had already destroyed me. For 20 years, I had built this life. I was a highly successful event planner, orchestrating luxury events for some of Houston's biggest corporations. Paul was a salesman, then a director, rising through the ranks of a major company. We weren't billionaires, but we were comfortable. I had always trusted Paul. I trusted him enough to let him handle most of our finances because I was too busy with work, and that was my greatest mistake. That night, after Paul walked out, I sat in the dark living room, laptop on my knees, checking our bank accounts, only to find they were nearly empty. He had drained our savings. Frantically, I searched through financial records and found something even worse. Our house, my house, had been secretly refinanced 3 months ago. Panic hit me like a freight train. I ran through the house, opening drawers, searching for any kind of paperwork that would prove I still had control over something. But it was all gone. Paul had done this meticulously. There's really not much left to split, Laura. His words echoed in my head, now making perfect sense. He wasn't just leaving me. He had been planning this for months, and I had been blind. For the next week, I was a ghost in my own life. Friends, colleagues, and even family members either avoided me or pitied me. Some whispered behind my back, "Well, she is getting older. Maybe she just couldn't keep up with him." But the worst part? Some of our mutual friends actually sided with Paul. He had been feeding them lies about our marriage for a year. Laura has changed. She doesn't care about me anymore. She only focuses on work, not on our relationship. I had no choice. And then I found out something even more devastating. The one person I thought I could still trust had known about this all along. Jennifer, my own sister. It was 3 days after Paul left when I received a message from an old friend. It contained a photo, Jennifer and Amanda, sitting together at an upscale restaurant, laughing, toasting glasses of wine. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. I immediately called Jennifer, my hands shaking so hard I nearly dropped the phone. "How long have you known?" There was silence. Then, finally, her voice came through, hesitant, even guilty. "Paul, he told me he hadn't loved you for a long time. I thought maybe it was best for you to just let him go." I almost laughed in disbelief. My own sister had known before I did. She had helped him plan this. For a moment, I felt completely shattered. But when I hung up, another emotion started to rise inside me. Fury. This wasn't going to end with me crying into a pillow. Paul thought he could walk away, start his new life, and watch me crumble? No. I was going to make sure he regretted every single step. I didn't sleep for the next 48 hours. Instead, I pored over every financial document, hired a private investigator, and met with one of the best divorce attorneys in Houston. And then, the truth began to unfold. Paul had not only stolen my money, but he had also been embezzling from his own company. He had been using company funds to finance his extravagant new life with Amanda. Luxury vacations, designer clothes, and private dinners at high-end restaurants. He wasn't just a cheating husband, he was a criminal, and I was going to be the one to take him down. I didn't cry anymore. That part of me, the woman who begged Paul to stay, who thought love meant sacrifice, was dead. Now, there was only me and the slow-burning rage that kept me awake at night. Paul thought he had won. He thought he had outsmarted me, but he had no idea who he was dealing. First, I needed leverage. Paul had drained our savings, refinanced the house behind my back, and left, but that day I was powerless. I had hired Michael, a sharpless divorce, who had taken one look at grinned a wolf. "Oh, this is going," Michael, freezing what was left of our joint assets before Paul could siphon off any more. His second move? Digging through every financial document Paul had ever touched. And that's when we found it. The missing money. Paul had been embezzling from his own company. For years, he had been skimming profits, hiding transactions, and using company funds to finance his new life with Amanda. Luxury vacations, designer jewelry, a brand new BMW, all paid for with stolen money. And I had the proof. But before I could go after Paul, I had to deal with my sister. Jennifer had betrayed me. She had been laughing with Amanda behind my back, helping Paul cover his tracks, and then had the audacity to tell me I should just let it go. I wasn't letting anything go. We need to talk. I showed up at Jennifer's house unannounced, my hands gripping a folder filled with evidence. When she opened the door, she actually had the nerve to look surprised. "Laura, what are you—" "Save it!" I pushed past her and into the living room. Jennifer folded her arms. "Are you really going to hold this against me? Paul just wanted to be happy." "Oh, please." I laughed, shaking my head. "You think this is about love? About Paul being happy? He stole from me, Jennifer. He stole our savings. He refinanced my house, and—" I threw the folder onto her coffee table. "He stole from his own company." Jennifer's face went pale. She glanced at the papers, flipping through them with shaking hands. This can't be real." "Oh, it's real. And if I go down, guess who else goes down?" I leaned in, lowering my voice. "You." Jennifer swallowed hard. She knew. By covering for Paul, she had made herself an accomplice. "You have two choices," I continued. "Either you start talking and tell me everything you know, or I take this to the police and you can explain your involvement to them." Her lip trembled. She was terrified. "Laura, I didn't think it would go this far." "Then start talking." And she did. Jennifer spilled everything. Paul had not just been planning to leave me, he had been planning to marry Amanda. The real reason he wanted me out of the house so quickly? Because he had already put a deposit on a lavish estate with my money. He told Amanda he'd propose as soon as the divorce was finalized, Jennifer whispered, rubbing her temples. I clenched my fists. He was trying to erase me, replace me like I had never existed. Over my dead body. Paul had taken everything from me, and now it was time for me to take everything from him. The next morning, Michael Tanner sent an anonymous tip to Paul's company. Within hours, an internal audit was launched. By lunchtime, Paul was called into a special meeting with the board of directors, and by evening, he was suspended pending investigation. Paul had no idea what was coming next, because while he was fighting for his job, I was preparing my next move. A week later, I got a text from an unknown number. "Meet me. Alone. Midnight." The location? A secluded parking lot on the outskirts of town. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. Was it Paul or someone worse? I took a deep breath, grabbed my car keys, and drove into the darkness. When I arrived, my headlights illuminated a single figure standing in the shadows. As I stepped out of the car, the figure turned. "Amanda, Laura," she said, her voice shaking. "We need to talk." I never expected to meet Amanda in a dark parking lot at midnight, but there she was, standing under the flickering glow of a street lamp, arms wrapped tightly around herself. Her perfect Instagram life didn't match the woman in front of me, the one with hollowed-out eyes, trembling hands, and the look of someone who had just realized she'd made a deal with the devil. "What do you want, Amanda?" She flinched at my tone. "Good. I wasn't here to play nice. She hesitated, her teeth worrying her bottom lip. "I need your help." I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that echoed through the empty lot. "Need my help? After everything you did? After you stole my husband? My life? What could you possibly need from me?" Her eyes flickered with something. Shame, fear, desperation. "Paul's not who I thought he was," she whispered. Amanda was shaking as she spoke. "I thought I won, Laura. I really did. But he's controlling. He tracks my phone and my spending. He goes through my messages. If I don't answer him fast enough, She cut herself off, sucking in a shaky breath. I narrowed my eyes. "He what?" Her voice was barely audible. "He gets angry. And not just yelling. He grabs me, Laura. Last week, he threw a glass at the wall next to my head. I should have felt satisfied. I should have felt something other than the slow, creeping dread curling in my stomach. But all I could think was, of course he did. Paul had never been a good man. He had just been better at hiding it from me. With Amanda, he didn't have to pretend. "I need to get away from him," she whispered. "But I can't. Not without your help." I folded my arms. "And why should I help you?" She swallowed hard. "Because if I leave, he's going to come after you next." My blood ran cold. "What are you talking about?" Amanda hesitated. Then, with shaking hands, she reached into her bag and pulled out a single piece of paper. "I found this in his office," she said, handing it to me. I took it. The second I saw what was on it, my stomach dropped. A signed affidavit claiming that I was mentally unstable, that I had been making threats against Paul, that I had been dangerous around the house. And at the bottom, a fake psychiatric report. "He's setting you up," Amanda whispered. "He's going to claim you're unhinged, that you threatened him, that you're dangerous." I clenched my fists, rage curling inside me like wildfire. Paul wasn't just trying to ruin me, he was trying to destroy me. "Okay," I said, my voice cold. "Tell me exactly what you want." Amanda exhaled in relief. "I need an escape plan, somewhere safe to go, a way to disappear before he figures out I'm leaving." I stared at her. This woman had been my enemy. She had laughed in my face, flaunted her affair, and stolen my life. Now she wants my help? But then I remembered Paul's hands around my throat. The time he had accidentally slammed the door too hard when I was standing in the way. The way he had spent years slowly unraveling my confidence, making me question myself. Paul wasn't going to stop. Not with Amanda, not with me. He needed to be taken down. "Fine," I said. "But if I help you, you help me." Amanda blinked. "What do you mean?" I took a step closer. "We don't just run, Amanda. We ruin him." The plan came together quickly. Amanda would pretend nothing had changed. She would smile, laugh, and play the perfect girlfriend. But behind closed doors, she would start collecting evidence. Financial records, bank statements, phone recordings, and most importantly, confessions. She would bait Paul into admitting everything. The stolen money, the fake psychiatric report, the real reason he had left me. Once we had it all, we would burn his entire world to the ground. Amanda returned to Paul the next day. And just like that, the game began. Over the next few weeks, I watched as Amanda played her part perfectly. She sent me updates in secret. "He's bragging about how he's going to get you institutionalized. Says he has friends who will make it happen. He's been lying about money. Even his boss doesn't know how deep he is in. He's paranoid. Keeps checking my phone when I'm asleep." The more we dug, the worse it got. Paul had forged signatures, manipulated legal documents, and funneled money through shady offshore accounts. He was a criminal. And now, we had proof. One night, I got a frantic call from Amanda. Her voice was shaking. "Laura, I can't do this anymore. He hit me." I froze. "Where are you?" "At home. He's in the shower." "But I can't stay here." That was it. I had played the waiting game long enough. Paul had gone too far. It was time to end this. We executed the final part of the plan that very night. Amanda texted Paul, telling him she needed to talk at his favorite bar. I was already there, sitting in a dark corner, watching as he walked in, cocky as ever. He had no idea that Amanda had already packed her bags, that the FBI had been tipped off about his financial crimes, that his company had launched an internal investigation, that his bank accounts had been flagged, that his entire world was about to collapse. And the best part? He thought he was winning. "Laura," he said, smirking as he slid into the booth across from me. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" I leaned forward, smiling. "I just wanted to see your face," I said, "before everything falls apart." And right on cue, his phone rang. His boss, then another, his lawyer, then sirens. Paul's face was drained of color. I took a sip of my wine. "Happy early birthday, Paul." Outside, the police cars pulled up. Inside, Paul finally realized what had happened and who had done it to him. Me. Paul was finished. At least, that's what I thought. But men like him, they don't go down quietly. The moment the police took him away, I felt it. A weight lifting off my chest. I had done it. I had taken back control. But deep down, a voice whispered, "It's not over yet." And that voice was right. 2 days after his arrest, I got a call from my lawyer. "Laura, we have a problem." My stomach twisted. "What kind of problem?" He sighed. Paul made bail. My breath caught in my throat. How? He should have been locked up for months while they built the case against him. He called in favors, pulled strings. Someone paid a ridiculous amount to get him out. I closed my eyes. Paul had powerful friends, people who owed him favors, people who wouldn't let him go down so easily. I should have known he wouldn't sit in a cell and wait for justice. He was coming for me. That night, I found an envelope taped to my front door. No stamp, no return address, just my name. Inside was a single sheet of paper. You think you've won? You haven't. Watch your back. No signature. No need for one. I already knew exactly who sent it. The next morning, Amanda's phone went dead. I tried calling her over and over, but nothing. By noon, I was pacing my kitchen, heart pounding. Please pick up, I muttered, dialing her number again. Voicemail, then, finally, a message. Amanda, I can't talk. I'm leaving town. It's not safe. Leaving town? I called her again. No answer. Another text came through. Amanda, I made a mistake. I should have never gone against him. I'm sorry. I stared at the screen, my blood turning ice cold. Paul had gotten to her. That night, I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Every sound outside made me flinch. Every shadow looked like a figure lurking in the dark. I locked every door and checked every window. Twice. But it didn't matter because at 2:37 a.m., I woke up to the sound of glass shattering. I shot up in bed, heart hammering. For a moment, there was silence. Then, footsteps. Inside my house. I grabbed my phone, hands shaking, and dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? I whispered into the phone. Someone's in my house. I didn't wait for the cops. I grabbed the baseball bat I kept under my bed and crept toward the noise. The house was dark, shadows stretching long across the floor. I could hear breathing. And then, a figure stepped into the dim glow of the kitchen light. Paul. He looked unhinged, hair disheveled, eyes wild. You ruined my life, Laura. I tightened my grip on the bat. You did that all by yourself. He took a step closer. You think this is over? You think you can just walk away? His voice was low, dangerous. I have nothing left to lose. The way he said it sent pure terror down my spine. Men like Paul, the most dangerous they'll ever be is when they're desperate. And he was very, very desperate. Get out, Paul, I warned. He laughed. Then he lunged. I swung the bat just as he grabbed for me. The impact sent a shockwave up my arms and Paul stumbled back, cursing. You're crazy! He came at me again. This time, I wasn't fast enough. His hands grabbed my wrist, twisting hard. The bat fell to the floor with a thud. Then, he shoved me back against the kitchen island, his face inches from mine. You always thought you were better than me? He spat. Smarter, stronger. But you're just a bitter, pathetic. Red and blue lights flashed outside. The sound of sirens split the air. Paul's head snapped toward the window. No, he muttered. No, no, no. Then he ran. The police burst through the door just as Paul reached the backyard. I watched as 4 officers tackled him to the ground. His shouts turned into desperate screams. She's lying! She did this to me! Laura, I'll make you pay! I didn't say a word. I just stood there, gripping the counter, watching as they hauled him away. Again, Paul was facing new charges now. Breaking and entering, assault, violating his bail conditions. This time, there was no bail. I should have felt safe, but I didn't, because Paul had still won. He had gotten to Amanda. He had made sure I knew that no matter what I did, I would always have to look over my shoulder. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the empty space where Paul had stood. I had fought back. I had survived, but the war wasn't over. Not yet, because men like Paul don't just disappear. They wait. They plot. And one day, they try again. I just had to be ready. Paul was in jail. Again. This time, there was no bail. No way for him to charm his way out. No high-powered lawyer is willing to take his case for free. I should have felt relief, but I didn't, because I knew him too well. Paul wasn't done. And sure enough, a storm was already brewing. 2 weeks after Paul's second arrest, I received a letter. Not from him, from his lawyer. I stared at the envelope, my fingers trembling. I hadn't even opened it yet, and I could already feel the venom inside. When I finally unfolded the letter, the words punched me in the gut. Dear Mrs. Mitchell, my client, Paul Mitchell, has filed a petition for the sale of your shared home and assets, claiming financial duress due to the circumstances surrounding his recent legal troubles. I laughed, out loud, a bitter, disbelieving laugh. He was trying to take my house? Again, even from behind bars. I took the letter straight to my lawyer, James. He read it in silence, his jaw tightening. He's desperate, I scoffed. No kidding. The good news, he doesn't have a legal leg to stand on. The bad news? James sighed. He doesn't care. He just wants to make your life hell. Paul wasn't fighting to win. He was fighting to drain me, to drag me through courts for years until I gave up. But he had underestimated me. I wasn't giving up. Not now. Just when I thought the situation couldn't get worse, my phone rang. An unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something in my gut told me to pick up. I pressed accept. Laura? I froze. That voice. Amanda? There was silence, then a shaky breath. I need your help. I met Amanda at a rundown motel on the outskirts of town. When I walked into the room, I barely recognized her. She looked wrecked, hair a mess, dark circles under her eyes. Terrified. What happened to you? I asked, closing the door behind me. She exhaled shakily. I thought I could escape him. I thought I was free. But she swallowed hard. I was wrong. She pulled out her phone and handed it to me. I pressed play on the video she had pulled up. It was Paul, inside her apartment. You think running will save you? His voice was chillingly calm. You think she'll protect you? Laura's not your friend, Amanda? She's just like me. She just hides it better. My blood ran cold. Amanda's hands were shaking. He got inside. I don't know how. He was waiting for me. I clenched my jaw. Even from behind bars, Paul was still pulling strings, still terrorizing, still trying to break me. I can't go to the police, Amanda whispered. He has people everywhere. I took a deep breath. Then we stop him ourselves. I wasn't playing defense anymore. I was done waiting for Paul to make his next move. This time, I was striking first. With Amanda's help, I gathered everything. Every shady deal Paul had ever made. Every off-the-record business transaction. Every hidden asset. And then, we leaked it to the courts, to the IRS, to every investigative journalist in the country. Within days, Paul's name was everywhere. Former business executive faces new allegations of tax fraud and money laundering. Convicted felons' hidden fortune exposed. Millions in offshore accounts under investigation. Exclusive. The dark truth behind Paul Mitchell's business empire. It was a feeding frenzy. Paul had been so focused on ruining me, he had forgotten to cover his own tracks. And now, the walls were closing in. I got a call from James the next morning. Laura, you're not going to believe this. Try me. Paul is trying to make a deal. He wants to talk to you. I blinked. He what? James hesitated. He's desperate, Laura. He knows he's finished. And now he's willing to negotiate. I thought about it. And then I said yes. The prison visitation room was cold and sterile. Paul walked in, handcuffed. He looked like hell, disheveled, hollow-eyed, nothing like the charming, powerful man he once was. You look terrible, I said, leaning back in my chair. His lips twisted into a mocking smile. You look great, Laura. I stayed silent, waiting. Paul leaned forward. You've won. I'll drop the legal fight for the house. I'll leave you alone. I raised an eyebrow. And in exchange? His eyes darkened. I need money. I laughed, right in his face. You spent years trying to destroy me. And now, you're begging me for help? Paul clenched his jaw. I have nothing left. I studied him. This broken man sitting across from me. This wasn't the monster I had once feared. This was just a pathetic, desperate fool who had lost everything. I stood up. That's not my problem. I walked away, leaving him exactly where he belonged, behind bars. 2 weeks later, Paul was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison, tax fraud, embezzlement, witness tampering. The list of charges buried him. His name? Ruined. His money? Gone. His power? Stripped away. And me? I was finally free. Amanda left town for good. She started over. Somewhere Paul could never find her. And me? I stayed, because this was my home, my life, and Paul Mitchell, he would never take anything from me ever again. As I sat on my porch one evening, watching the sun set over the city, my phone buzzed. A message from Sarah. Dinner tonight? Celebrating your victory? I smiled, because for the first time in years, I had truly won, and I wasn't looking over my shoulder anymore. The morning after Paul's sentencing, I woke up to silence. Not the suffocating, heavy silence that had filled my house when he first left. Not the silence of heartbreak and loneliness. This was different. It was peace. For the first time in years, I had no one pulling me into battles I didn't ask for. No legal fights. No whispered threats. No weight of betrayal pressing on my chest. It was over. And now, for the first time in my adult life, I could finally ask myself, what do I want? The first thing I did was redesign my home. Not just a few new decorations or a fresh coat of paint. I transformed it. The old master bedroom, gone. I converted it into a personal library, filled with books I had always meant to read but never had the time for. Paul's old home office, now a studio. I'd always loved painting, but I had let that passion fade over the years. Now I let the colors spill onto the canvas unapologetically, and the kitchen, the place where he had stood, lying to my face about needing space, I knocked out the walls, opened it up, let the light in. This house wasn't just mine now, it was finally a reflection of me. But it wasn't just my house that needed rebuilding. I did too. With the legal nightmare behind me, I poured my energy into something new, my own event planning company. For years, I had worked for other people, making their businesses thrive, sacrificing my time to build their dreams. Not anymore. I named it New Chapter Events. Not just because it was my new beginning, but because I wanted to help others celebrate theirs. Weddings, retirement parties, launch events. I put my heart into all of it. And within 6 months, business was booming. I was flying to different cities, taking on clients I had only dreamed of working with. My name was starting to mean something in the industry, not because of Paul, not because of my past, but because of me. And as the business grew, so did my confidence. I started dressing for myself, not for anyone's approval. I started speaking up in rooms where I used to shrink. And most importantly, I stopped caring what anyone thought, including Paul. One night, I got an email from a prison account. I almost ignored it, but curiosity got the best of me. Laura, I know you probably won't read this, but I have to try. I'm sorry. For everything. I lost myself somewhere along the way. I was stupid. I was selfish. I see that now. You were the best thing that ever happened to me, and I threw it all away. I don't expect forgiveness, but I need you to know. I regret it. I hope you're happy. Truly. I stared at the screen, letting the words sink in, and then I deleted it. Because Paul's regret didn't change anything. His remorse wasn't my responsibility, and I had nothing left to say to him. One afternoon, I was at a coffee shop going over final details for an upcoming gala, and that's when I met him. No dramatic, movie-like moment. No sparks are flying across the room, just a simple interaction. He spilled his coffee. I handed him a napkin. Rough day? I asked, smiling. He chuckled. Something like that. New job, new city, trying to figure it all out. We ended up talking for nearly an hour. His name was Daniel. He had just moved to Houston for work, thought this cafe had good vibes, and decided to check it out. Before he left, he hesitated. Can I take you to dinner sometime? For the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of excitement. Not because I needed a man, not because I was searching for love, but because for once, I could say yes without fear. No baggage, no guilt, no past is holding me back. Just a simple, genuine yes. 1 year after Paul walked out of my life, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, looking at a version of myself I had never seen before. I looked strong, not because I had fought through hell, not because I had survived betrayal, but because I had thrived. I had built something for myself, and for the first time in years, I wasn't looking back. One evening, I sat on my porch, watching the sunset, and I did something unexpected. I wrote a letter to the woman I was 1 year ago. Dear Laura, you're going to think your life is over. You're going to believe that everything good has been taken from you, but you're wrong. You are about to discover something you never realized before. You are capable of more than you ever imagined. You are going to rebuild your life from the ground up, not because you have to, but because you deserve to. And one day, you're going to look in the mirror and realize that losing him, it was the best thing that ever happened to you. With love, your future self, I folded the letter, placed it in a drawer, and smiled to myself because I knew I was never going to need it. Paul's downfall wasn't my triumph. My triumph was the life I had built without him. I was no longer the woman crying on her 50th birthday, begging a man to stay. I was stronger, wiser, happier, and I had finally learned the most valuable lesson of all. The best revenge isn't proving them wrong, it's proving yourself right. A year after everything, I stood on the rooftop of a hotel in New York, sipping champagne after closing the biggest deal of my career. I wasn't here because of Paul. I wasn't here because of my past. I was here because I had built this, because I had chosen me. I glanced at my phone, a message from Daniel. Dinner tonight? No work talk? Just good food and good company. I smiled, because for the first time in my life, I was stepping into the future on my terms, and I had never felt freer.